Hello. I'm standing in the courtyard of Trinity Episcopal Church in Tottsfield, Massachusetts, and we're looking at some statues. These statues are of the disciples sleeping and of Jesus praying. These statues were given to us by a man named Bill Coolidge, who gave the land for our church and also supported the church during his lifetime. They were given in memory of Jonathan Daniels, a civil rights martyr who was also training to be an Episcopal priest. And Bill Coolidge not only gave us these statues, but he gave also another copy of these statues to the Gethsemane Monastery in Kentucky, where Thomas Merton was a monk. Now, the reason why we want to take a look at these statues today is that they help us perhaps come to terms with what's happening in our society right this very minute, as protests, passionate, righteous protests are happening throughout this country because a black man was murdered by white policemen who were not in control perhaps of what they were doing. And we're caught in the middle of this coronavirus, and we at Trinity Church need to consider what we will do in response to what is happening around us. Now, we have a connection both with Jonathan Daniels, who was a civil rights martyr. He died protecting the life of a black woman when the two of them were both let out of jail in a small town in Alabama, and of Thomas Merton, who was a contemplative monk who spoke to many of the issues of his day. Now, Thomas Merton was, as I said, contemplative. And so in his writings, when he wrote about the race relations of his day, he wrote about them in a book called Confessions of a Guilty Bystander, which says a lot about how he felt and how he saw himself. And at one point in this book, he says, "When love is only a virtue among many, we forget that God is love, and become incapable of that all-embracing love by which we secretly begin to know God as our Creator and Redeemer, who saved us from the limitations of a purely restrictive and aimless existence under the law." So Merton's response was a global response, and he looked to our relationship to God as the place where we could right the ways we were going wrong. Now, Jonathan Daniels was a younger man, and when he was converted to his commitment to Christ at Church of the Advent in Boston, Massachusetts, he had this terrible need to go do something. So that's what he did. He went, he answered Martin Luther King's call to come and help with the desegregation efforts in the South. He stayed, he went with his friends. He stayed longer than his friends stayed. He was active in marches. He was active in efforts to register people to vote. He was active in being with children and adults who were learning how to read. He lived with a black family. He went with his black friends to a white Episcopal church and was denied entrance. And finally, he was killed as he was defending one of his friends outside a convenience store after they and two others had been let out of jail. So these days, we are people who have grown up and have lived all of our adult lives in the shadow of the civil rights movement. We can quote Martin Luther King. We know that we stand with God as the arc of history moves toward justice. We have a dream right along with Martin Luther King that we can all be together and little black children and little white children can be friends. But we also know that we live still in a troubled world, that the civil rights movement is not done. We know how difficult it is to cross the color line. We have friends, we have family whose skin is a different color than ours, and we know how that complicates many things for our relationships with people that we love. These are things that we know. So, knowing all of this, what is it that we can do? We can act as individuals. We can interrogate our conscience and ask, what is God asking of us today? But also as a church, which was founded at a period of time in which it was understood that the church needed to speak to the civil rights movement and to take actions to further the civil rights of all individuals. That we belong to a church that has in its garden these statues that were dedicated to Jonathan Daniels. What is it that we can do? How is it that we can pray? And how is it that we can take the witness of these two towering individuals, Thomas Merton, who believed in contemplation and prayer, and actually spoke out often against frenzied action, and also the witness of this young man who was moved to do things so that the world might be changed? That's the question that we have before us today during these weeks, and I hope that we as a church can answer that question in such a way that when we look back on these days, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, we'll be proud of what we did, and we won't try to wish it all away. So blessings on all of you, and blessings on all of us as we pray and deliberate about what is required of us at Trinity Church in Topsfield, Massachusetts at this moment. Thank you.